All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. This is your fourth and final workshop, and we hope that this one will be particularly instructive for the application, actually creating this video today. So this one's entitled Future Storytelling and Video Production Tips, and we're actually going to cover 4 different areas. So we're going to begin now. All right. Next slide. Technical difficulties, but we will get there. All right, so we're going to start with our project overview. If you just want to hit that next slide. So just a couple of things. These are all on the Vision 2050 website, but just kind of wanted to talk about a few of these things to ground you for today's session and really get you thinking all day about your project. So remember that you do need to create an innovative hospitality and tourism business. So think about what business means. There could be a lot of aspects of what a business is, but it should reflect those environmental, economic, and social needs for Central Florida in 2050. So again, kind of keep thinking about that context as we go through today and talk about some of those specifics. You will need to incorporate future trends and continuously going back to these 2 ideas of sustainability, so environmental sustainability, project sustainability, and equity goals. So making sure that everyone in the area has some kind of equality, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide as well. Telling the story of your business, you will be creating this 3-minute video, and the end of today's session will be giving you a lot of detail about that. And make sure, again, you keep going back to the specific future context of Orange County and their Vision 2050. So we do suggest you actually checking out their literature for that. But of course, the fun part is creativity and originality of concepts. So even though we do want it kind of grounded in these principles, we also want you to have fun with this and do those cool things that Joe was telling us 2 weeks ago about thinking about the future, envisioning the future, and just being creative with it. Next slide. So 2 things you want to think about, one being the considerations that are required of the project. So that's again, sustainable, equitable future, hospitality and tourism economy of our area, the idea of attracting visitors. So this is still a tourist attraction. We do still want you to think about people coming in to Central Florida. We do also want you to think of how do we maintain our long-term kind of competitive edge. So maybe compared to other destinations, how do we keep Orlando top of people's mind? Thinking also about our respect that we have now. So the kinds of things you can play off that we already have. So that being exceptional experiences and memories, and maybe some of the things we talked about last week, nostalgia and experience and things like that. And then think about also very specific rule here. Think about the impact on the future structure of the lodging sector. So whatever you do with your project, is that somehow going to impact the lodging sector as well? Now, we also talk about in the project structural inequalities. So just being aware, there is a kind of connotation with the service industry that this is a low wage economy, that sometimes people in this economy don't have as much job security. And then you really want to consider this idea of everyone in the community having well-being, having a high quality of life, the need for shared prosperity. So this is not just these top attractions, but smaller attractions, and then members of the community all sharing in the prosperity of Orlando being successful and Central Florida in general being successful. And then the need for balanced growth. So think about, you don't want to do something too crazy that's going to bring in so many tourists that we don't have the ability to grow in a balanced way. Next slide. So just thinking about the process, I'm sure all of you have been involved in projects before, but really quick outline of the process: start with a brainstorm, broad, messy ideas, concepts, take out like a piece of paper or on your computer screen and just start thinking about stuff. What do you want your attraction to look like? What is it? Anything that you want in this brainstorm. But then you want to organize these ideas. So you want to figure out, where are you going to start? Are you going to start with that research? Have you already done the research? And then come up with a script, come up with your artifact from the future, come up with graphics, and then maybe figure out anything that could be settled pretty early on in the process that you can get out of the way. Next, you want to revise. organized. So you want to focus and refocus until you have a clarity of vision. Those of you who are working in groups, especially, you want to kind of make sure you're on the same page before you move past this step. Make sure you're all having the same kind of vision. Next, you're going to prepare for your final product. So you do this by creating drafts, testing drafts. I would certainly, if you're recording something, just try out your speech or your narration a couple of times before you actually start recording. Just try it out. Does it work? Does it seem to work? And then finally, the production stage, you want to film your video, you want to edit your video and fine tune the video, and then eventually upload your video to your final site. Next slide. So this is a brainstorm. We don't have the time to sit here and do this, but I do want you to think about this. And if you do need to go back and watch this video later, but just think of a current business that maybe reflects the areas of the project that we are asking you for. So innovation, sustainability, equity, appeal to visitors, things like that. Can you think of something already that you like? This might be a good thing to give you inspiration. So you don't want to be exactly like any of those businesses, but this might give you some kind of baseline of where to work from. Maybe some particular organization really comes to mind when you think of these qualities. What is it that they do? What is it they do successfully? What are the strategies that they're using right now? So something to think about as you go forward. Next slide. So next we're going to talk about storytelling. So if you notice, we're very specific in our description of this project that you're telling the story of a business. And so the first thing you think of with story is audience. Who is the audience for this particular story or any kind of communication? So we know that for this project, it's going to be those officials of Orange County, as well as all the professionals at Rosen College of Hospitality Management. So think about, again, the kinds of things that this audience might be expecting. You always want to research your target audience. And in this case, they're probably going to want language that's consistent with professionalism. So you think about a story, your language tends to be catered towards those it is given to. And think about this as being, it's formal, it's professional. You're thinking about the idea of pitching this to government officials and to university officials. So you might think about that. But you also want to be accessible. You want to make sense. You don't want it to be so hard to understand that you're just saying, wait, what did you say? I didn't really get what you were saying. And of course, be creative. We all want to see your creativity. We want to see what you can do. We're actually doing this with you because you are the future. So we're excited and interested to hear about what you're doing. So be creative. Next slide. So the other thing you think of in a story is that it's going to have characters. And it's going to have characters that are going to do particular actions. And that tends to be the case in most storytelling. Who are the characters in your story? And I don't want you to forget about these two characters in your story, because first you have the tourists who are going to come, they're going to be doing particular activities, particular actions. But then you also have that community you're serving. So I don't want you to forget about that community, especially because all of us on this call, we're currently in this community, right? So you want to make sure that we know what the community is doing as well. And then think about, with characters, how much agency do these characters have? So how much control over their experience will they have? And kind of think back to what we mentioned about the different kinds of structures and controls and the desire for play and things like that that your tourists might have. Next slide. So setting, if you remember last week, we talked a lot about environmental design. So this is the same thing. So when you are creating this tourism business, what are the surroundings of your tourists and of your community members? What is the location that all these actions are going to take place? What does it look like? When we think of setting, we often think time, place, and sometimes emotional state. So how are the tourists going to feel when they're there, let's say? But we already know part of the setting, right? Part of the setting here is Central Florida in 2050. But we're asking you to go a little bit beyond just that. So don't just say, well, it takes place in Central Florida in 2050. What does it look like? What does the venue sound like? What kinds of things can I touch there? What can I do when I'm there? And what feelings does it evoke? What am I going to feel as I'm going through these spaces and things that you are going to create? Next slide. So next is structure. So structure is something we talked about last week in terms of the structure of experience, but you also want to have clear structure in a story. And I think most of you are pretty familiar with the idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you think about I have here kind of what you might have learned in literature class or something, being the Freytag's pyramid, or this kind of basic dramatic structure where you're introduced to an idea. There's usually some kind of inciting incident that gets you interested, and you're seeing what's going on. There's some kind of path to this climax, which is the most intense moment within the story. Then there's going to be some fallout because of maybe some big decision was made. And then there's this denouement, or the kind of unraveling. So the conclusion, what's going on. So you don't need to look at this in this maybe more difficult manner, but you do notice that even this more complicated structure has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you think about an essay structure, you think about the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. So you do want it to have some kind of clear structure. And I can just tell you that you don't necessarily have a plot you're working with. Maybe you do, maybe you have, this happened and then they did this and then they did this, but you could also organize with themes. So you could say this part of the video is about sustainability, and this part of the video is about innovation and things like that. So there should be some organization. If you have watched a movie or maybe read a novel with an experimental structure, so maybe you've seen flashbacks, and maybe you've seen in media res, as in they're beginning in the middle of the action and they didn't really tell you what was going on. Maybe you've even seen something as interesting as like a stream of consciousness structure, where somebody's just kind of saying whatever they feel. None of these structures are a good idea for this video. So we want creativity, but we don't want it to be incoherent. And this is probably not going to be the project for those really exciting narrative experimental ideas. So, but it is a good project to use transitions. So make sure you're using transitions, even if it's as basic as first, next, finally, and things like that. Again, signposting where you are going and helping the audience understand the path that you are on. Next slide. So in terms of the organization of your project, closely related here to structure, remember that there is going to be a juxtaposition. Things will be side by side, in other words, of image, sound, and text. So there's likely you're probably going to use these elements in your video. So just be really careful about these things going there. So you want to put your text, your visuals, your artifacts from the future, whatever it is you're creating for this video, you want to put them in deliberately, and there should be a clear purpose for them. So I love cat memes, but why would you have a cat meme in the video? And if you're going to use a cat meme in the video, it should probably be about your particular topic. So I do sometimes see stuff just kind of thrown in there for fun, and that's cool, but you really want it to make sense with the content that you're talking about. I would also suggest using a graphic organizer. So later, Gisele is going to talk about storyboarding. This is just another form of graphic organizer here that I have on the screen. So essentially on the left side, you would put in what's going on at this particular moment in the video with your visuals. So are you putting a logo there? Do you have images, pictures that you're putting in there? Maybe your artifact from the future. Is the presenter going to be on camera at that point? Are you going to demonstrate something? Do you have like a prototype maybe that you've created? And then on the right, you have what is going to go during that same exact spot with that audio. So what are you going to hear? Are you going to hear music at that point? Are you putting in a sound effect at that point? Is there going to be maybe a narrator who's narrating over the text, but we can't see them? So just kind of come up with this, and I might do scene 1, scene 2, or you could time code it. So you could do 30 seconds, these things are happening. At 1 minute, these things are happening. But try to give yourself some kind of graphic organizer just so this doesn't get too overwhelming. Next slide. All right, and then language is definitely something I think you will note with storytelling. So if you have maybe no picture on there, but you really want to describe the experience maybe that the tourist is going to go through, just use descriptive language, use sensory details. These are the things you can see, smell, taste, etc. when you're in this place. But I would also say the opposite, which is don't just think that a picture can give you 1,000 words or whatever that statement is. If the picture doesn't seem to make sense in context, it's not going to speak for itself. So you may end up having to speak for it. And that brings me to this idea of explicit versus implicit presentation. So an explicit presentation is just telling you through either verbal or written format, this is what I'm talking about. So a really good example is the top of this picture here. These are the sustainable development goals for the city. We want gender equality. We want clean water and sanitation, affordability and clean energy, whatever. So that is telling you flat out what we want. Implicit is going to be using visuals. It's going to be using maybe environmental things. So maybe use sound effects and things like that. And so you're not necessarily exactly telling them, but using those other means to tell a story. So the good example is the bottom picture here. This is from Vision 2050. And then you're looking at this, it doesn't say anything, but what it does show you is that this is a very green space. So they're envisioning a future that's very green, just surrounded with public spaces that are very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Also that there's kind of an architectural style I'm seeing, you know, a similarity between all these buildings. I'm also seeing kind of an organization of the space. So there's clear pathways and things like that. So I didn't say any of that, but my picture revealed that. So just be careful, though, that you are looking at that assignment, because some of the things we're asking, you need to tell us explicitly. So we ask you to tell us, you know, how does it meet, say, the sustainability and equity goals of the county? But there might be other things that are more implicit. So just again, thinking about what parts of your video do you want to just tell the audience what you're saying, and what parts of the video do you want to show the audience what you think? And then my last one is more of a grammar one, and that is try not to constantly switch between tenses. So I've seen this a lot, going between past tense and future tense, or present tense, and just going back and forth and getting confusing. I think because you're describing something, if you use the present tense, it feels more present. It feels like it's happening right now. I think that's a good tense to go with. But if you go with past tense, that's okay too. But again, just try to keep it consistent. And then finally, the same thing with person. So first person, or I or we, second person, or you, and then third person, the kind of more formal he, she, it, they. You don't want to just keep going back and forth within your sentences between all those different persons. So you could use multiple persons. You could talk about what you believe and then what you are creating in the third person, let's say, but you just don't want to keep going back and forth between them, because it can be confusing for your audience. Next slide. All right, finally, brainstorm questions again. So think about this. What will your characters be? What will your activities be? What will your setting be for your particular business? And then your video. So what will your video structure be? What are the primary messages of your video? And then what visuals, text, and artifacts do you plan on using for your video? And then finally, because I know that, you know, I'm looking at the clock here, you guys have a month to do this, and that's a good amount of time, but it's not a great amount of time. So you might get stuck when you're in the process. So these are just a couple of suggestions. Number one, try free writing or focused free writing. So free writing means just writing anything that you're thinking about. It can be about the video game you're playing, or about you know, some homework assignment that you hate. It can be just about writing anything that you want to get the juices flowing. Whereas focused free writing, you might maybe just write about an experience you particularly loved, or what you feel about the idea of sustainability. Means you're kind of still writing whatever you want, but it's on a particular topic. I do suggest that you talk to others about the project. So whether that's your other teammates or just other people in your friends and family, that might be a good thing to kind of spark the conversation. I definitely suggest getting inspiration from elsewhere. So I think you're going to have in Joe's presentation might be a couple of inspirational artifacts. Maybe think about that experience that you really love going to, maybe get inspiration from there. What are those things that you love there? Take a short brain break. I think if you go too long, you're probably going to need a brain break. And then maybe you're going to need a longer break, and then just come back later with a fresh mindset. But I think I can speak for everyone who's talking today. We all go through this. We all get stuck. Just come up with some ways to give yourself a little space and then come back to the project. Next slide. All right, now we have our very awesome futurist Joe, and he's going to talk about the specific future storytelling, which is, by the way, what he does for a living. So I can't wait to hear it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baker. First off, I have to tell you that my next free writing assignment is going to be imagining James Joyce in the year 2050. So I think that's a fascinating idea. But as Dr. Baker said, that's not for this particular project. Everything that she has just outlined for you are key components as you think about trying to tell a story about the future. But there are a couple of other layers that we want to add to that to help you sort of work through this project and get the best possible outcome. Next slide, please. Start by understanding what the special challenges are that you're facing when you're doing this kind of work. The biggest problem you have is that you're ultimately presenting this to an audience that's living in 2020, 30 years away from the time that you're trying to create a story for. And one of the things that you can't do is assume that they're going to treat this like science fiction. In science fiction, they're not going to necessarily question all of your assumptions because it's science fiction, it's fiction, right? You're trying to convince them that while this may not be the future, it is truly a possible future, and that raises the stakes a little bit. So a couple of things you need to be aware of. There are going to be built-in obstacles. The best vision of the future needs to be a little bit provocative. And by that, you want to suggest that you want to challenge people that some things are going to have to change. And that's a really iffy thing when you're dealing with government institutions and businesses particularly. You want them to be comfortable accepting that these changes you're going to propose might actually happen. And the way you do that is by doing your trend research that we talked about last time. You don't have to know everything about the trends in the future, but pick one or two, go deep enough that if someone challenges you, you can say, this is what we're seeing today, and this is why we think it will manifest itself in a certain way in 2050. And if you anchor everything you're doing in terms of that, then I think you have a much better chance of shaking people out of their mindset, which is the future is going to be just like today. That's generally what we try to assume. Okay? So that's going to be the first part of that. There are lots of other ways that futurists try to make the future real. What I want to do is just take a couple of minutes and outline the approach I typically use just because of my background and the one that has actually worked best for me. Next slide. I start by focusing on that future character that Dr. Baker talked about. As you begin to think about your attraction, your business, whatever it is, think about it in terms of one or two different approaches. One is the people who will experience it. And before you take them through that experience, imagine what the rest of their life might be like in 2050. What are their needs? How will they be different than the needs of people today? What are their wants and desires? What's their social situation? Will they live individually? Will they live in a family group? Will they live in some different kind of group? And then most importantly, what are their capabilities? Why will those be radically, radically different? And as I said, you can think about a couple of different characters. You can think about the ultimate tourist or the ultimate customer of whatever it is you're creating. And that has a long tradition in the theme park design business. Whenever we were designing something new at Disney, that's always what we focused on. We tried, in the words of Marty Sklar, to walk in the shoes of our guest. And so you want to be able to do that, not just through your experience, but through every part of their life, and really know this person, bring them to life for you if you possibly can. The other possibility is to think about who your business owner or business employee might be in 2050. What are their capabilities going to be? What are they trying to actually accomplish? You know, one of the things that is a theme in all of this that we're talking about is creating future tourist opportunities that also benefit the wider community. So maybe the motivation of a business owner in 2050 will be different than the motivation of the business owner today. So take that time, really do that free writing around this idea. It's a great way to sort of explore this and bring that character into your group and make sure that they have a voice throughout the entire thing. Next slide. Then when you start to design the actual experience, make sure that you are designing it for that future persona, not for the people who will be reading or watching your video, right? You want to start by knowing that the thing you're creating is going to work in 2050, not in 2020. And so there should be a couple of things in that. where you're going to have to stop and think, well, that feels very different. How is that actually going to work? And that goes back to the trend thing and understanding how the trends work and what you can actually try to do with that. So make sure that you're really focused on the future as you do that. Next slide. And that, of course, brings you to the big challenge again. You have to then move from 2050 back to that 2020 audience. How do you connect with them? If it feels too far out, you will lose them. They will think, oh, this is just fiction and it's not relevant to us. And what we want these people to do is to be inspired by your ideas to incorporate particular strategies and tactics into the strategic vision they're creating for the future of Central Florida. So we need to make sure that we're able to bridge that gap. There are a couple of different ways you do that, but the key element is to always think about two different things: what is different and what is the same. And if you think about what is the same, there are certain things that will not change. The obvious one is we think there's still going to be tourists in 2050. We imagine that those tourists will have some of the same desires and needs as we do today. The experience may be different, but the reason they travel probably won't be in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. The way that we organize as individuals into small groups, whether it's families, friends, social groups, will probably be somewhat similar in 2050 and somewhat different. So make sure you've made that list. This is what's different, but most importantly, this is what is the same. And then the key is making sure that you communicate those everyday activities. Just stick a few of those in there so that people have something to hang on to. They have something to relate to. Next slide. And one of the best ways to do that is to think in terms of what we call artifacts from the future. Now, you don't necessarily have to have one of these in your final presentation, but you certainly should be thinking about what they might be. And typically they're things that people use to interact with the world that they live in. The couple of slides here draw from a project that was actually about the future of food. And it came from a group called the Institute for the Future. And you can see their website there. It's a great place to go to get other examples of artifacts because they've been in this business for 30 or 40 years. They've done tons of different future explorations, and they create amazing examples of what these artifacts might be. And of course, you'll see in these are just Photoshop. That's all this is, right? You know, they don't, for your purposes, have to be hugely elaborate. You don't have to build a flying car or something like that. Although if you want to, we think that was cool. But what you want to do is imagine them and build them out of cardboard if you want to. Create them as little sketches and doodles. Their purpose is to help you ground that audience in this future that is different than today, that exists today. Next slide. And these, of course, are the ones that I showed you last time. So I'm just tossing them back in here for you to remind you, because I think for this particular project, thinking about what the postcard would be for your business is a really interesting idea. You know, the postcard, the marketing material, whatever that might be. But imagine two things about that. What would it look like if you created a postcard for people to send to their friends? It might be digital, it might be all sorts of different things. And also it might really be fun to write the message that the visitor wants to put on that postcard. What does she say about visiting your future business, tourist experience or business? That I think is the really interesting piece that you want to incorporate in all of this. Next slide. And finally, what I want you to take from this brief piece of today's workshop is this is what you need to do to incorporate this into the project. Think about at least one artifact that if you were to give me, if you could create, I would immediately go, oh yeah, I get it. It could be a souvenir. I think souvenirs are a great opportunity for this particular project. And if you're like most of us, if you look around your apartment or your home, there's a really good chance that you've got a ton of tourist souvenirs that you picked up somewhere. I know I have way too many from Disney that I've collected over the years, right? It could be more practical. It could be a device or process that's actually used in the workday experience. And that goes back to Dr. Baker's original ideas, thinking about a business that exists today. Think about what they need in order to operate. And how would you create a new device or a new piece of technology that they could actually use? And of course, it could finally be something that visitors bring with them when they actually visit. If you go to a theme park, particularly Disney today, you see lots of little girls particularly, but little girls and little boys dressed up in the costumes of their favorite characters that they brought with them. What are your guests going to bring to your experience in the future? Once again, this doesn't have to be a perfect piece of art. It doesn't have to be brilliantly rendered. It can be kludged together out of, poster board and concrete, cardboard, but it will be incredibly important to your process as you begin to create all of this. And I think that's what I have to offer, because Dr. Baker's already given you a great introduction to how you tell fabulous stories. So good luck, and I'll turn it back over to Gisele.
Hello, everyone. We're going to bring you some tips and video production ideas here. We're also going to share the experience of our teaching assistant, Margaret Zarilla here. She produced the video for a competition. So this is exciting to share all this with you. I understand that some of you already know what I'm talking about, probably know much better than I do. I just started into video myself, so I know you're probably way ahead. But first, just the reminder of the requirements. Nobody watched anything longer than 3 minutes anyways, right? Or TikTok. Make sure you're saving MP4 when you submit, including your video, all the names, the major, the Rosen College logo. Everything is provided on the hub. And as Dr. Baker said, you only have until March 25th. It's about 30 days, a month. It can be a lot of time, but it's not really a lot of time. Keep in mind that deadline and what you need to do in order to get that ready by March 25th. Then where you go to submit the video, the Professional Development Hub. When you click in, we know that there are tons of things there are tons of information, but check the second module and you see right there the Hospitality and Tourism Vision 2050 submission page. So there is where you're going to submit your MP4 video. Okay. So some tools here, we brought in some of the free apps out there that you can download on your phone. And again, you probably know them, so like Film. I know Margaret uses Film right now. She can tell you a little bit about it. Some other apps that you can get from any of the phones or the lab at Rosen College as well. But as is being told before, plan ahead. Don't just go out there filming everything and not having a plan. So plan ahead. What is the location, the place, the time of the day? And then choose what you're going to use. Are you going to use your phone? You're going to need to borrow a camera. Keep in mind that the library and UCF also has those resources that you can borrow as well. So you can do more research on that. That's a possibility. But think of where you're going to use it. And this you probably already have on your phone or on your laptop. I know when I first got my iPhone 100 years ago, I deleted the iMove because I thought I had too many things. And now I went back and put it back, and it's free, it came with the phone. It's very easy to use. So keep in mind that you have that as well. And from your typical Windows computer, you can have the Movie Maker app already on the computer or your laptop. Same for the iMovie, it's on the Mac and MacBook as well. So then at Rosen College, do y'all know you have those resources here? We do have a special Adobe Creative license. So if you come into the lab in room 216, you are able to log in and use those very refined tools. If you heard about Adobe Premiere, the Premiere Rush, that's one you can get an app as well to put on your phone. But we know those cost a lot, but you can come into Rosen College to the lab to room 216 and use those softwares. And another option is remoting to the lab and the library. So if you go to UCF lab, you can remote in to the labs or to the library, and you'll be able to use those softwares like that as well. We can go through afterwards if you have any questions, or if you want to ask me how to do that, we can guide you through. But it's very important to know all the things that you have in terms of technology at UCF. There's a lot, and I know a lot of people don't take advantage of it. Then if you're not sure how to use it, I did this, of course. YouTube, your first option. That's what I did too. YouTube, you can learn anything from YouTube. That's great. But keep in mind the free LinkedIn Learning courses that we have. And this is a sample of everything. I put it on my learning path, and I'm learning all the softwares, the Creative Cloud, um, anything. You can learn anything through LinkedIn Learning. And at least that way you have something. You can share that on your LinkedIn profile and you have that certificate to show off afterwards. So it's a much better bang for your buck doing through LinkedIn courses than YouTube. But of course, sometimes you need the diversity of ways to learn. So it doesn't hurt to try both. So then, here, so I want to bring you Margaret. She's our teaching assistant. She participated in a competition and created a video. So she's going to share her experience with you.
Yes. Hi guys. Again, I'm the internship TA. You probably saw me in some of the Instagram stories I did for the Prep 20 Vision project a couple weeks ago. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you everyone for letting me in here. I would like to show you, this is a video piece that my team and I worked for the Most Talented Leaders of Hospitality Challenge. This is a competition that originated in Montreal, Canada. And the reason that I want to tell you that, it's because that is the why behind our characters are the ones that we selected, which you're going to see in a second. But also this is the piece that led us to become the one of the finalists of the competition, because we had a very strong storytelling. We were able to tell the actual customer journey for this upcoming hotel that's all about sound and light. They wanted an environment that was immersive, where it didn't feel like a hotel, but still function as a hotel as much as possible. Let's play the video. It is our pleasure to now introduce you to our first elite guest at Sonolux. Joni and Moira Rose are excited to visit Sonolux as the first creme de la creme guest. What they don't know is that their bebés will also get a taste of the hotel. Mr. Rose begins to curate his desired experience through the Sonolux app, powered by Mesmar Journey. The interface will show a clear view of all the original experiences. Per Moira's request, they have chosen a combination of the white canvas and art connoisseur experience, a unique way to enjoy what Sonolux has to offer. These experiences are inspired by the aesthetics of performance arts and fine arts, curated by local artists and technology partners. Inside the hotel, they're stunned to see the dynamic previews of arts on the walls generated by Automata as part of the art connoisseur experience. The interactive halls, lobby, lounge, and other common areas within the hotel provide a digital sneak peek of the local art scene in the city, such as live events, concerts, and art galleries, all facilitated by Automata and in collaboration with the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts Digital Mediation Innovation Lab. These common areas are also featuring wayfinding stations, powered by My Smart Journey, to explore nearby attractions and other unpredictable Sonolux experiences. Upon entering the Maestro Suite, Mr. and Mrs. Rose are welcomed by a signature Sonolux sketch with elegant scents and other personal care items curated by Deja Vu, and interactive art installations tailored to their experience. The Roses are also intrigued by the art-based music curated by the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. What they don't know is that Alexis and David are in the room next door again. Sonolux experiences are so well crafted that they have agreed on trying out the Zen experience for the first time. It's a bit long, but I still wanted to show you different scenes of the pieces, because just as John said, you know, we don't have to do such a big production. We can just work with Photoshop and try to mimic as much as we're trying to convey. So for this approach, it worked for us because of time constraints. So I just went ahead and gather all my pieces to put together and build the scenes for this. Some of the logos, those mean that they're just like startups that we had to incorporate as part of the competition requirements. Let's go to this next slide.
So this is how our process began. We already talked about, planning ahead. The more that you can plan, the better, because that way you can save time. So there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. We have showed the scene card. Storyboard is also another way. It is just very time consuming. So it really depends how easy and time consuming it is for you. If you're pretty good at, you don't have to be like amazing at drawing. It's just for you to organize the scenes in your head, but it does take a bit more time than just making a script. And that is actually what we decide to do. On your left side, this is actually the very first draft of the script that we prepare before creating the video. So, and we talked about beginning, middle, and end. We separated our scenes by pre-arrival, what happened when the Sheets Creek characters are inside after they leave, what happens in the middle at dinner time. So once we had down our ideas and what they were going to do in every single scene, I was ready to gather all my resources, all the gifts, or all the pictures of the rooms, of the hallways, and then I just went ahead and put that together in, next slide, I just went ahead and put it on a Google Slides. Yes, this is not part of like video production stuff, but because of time constraints, this worked for me perfectly. And the rest of my team was not in the same city. So a way to work together. They helped me gather some of the pictures. So the Google Drives and Google Slides allow us all to jump in and like add whatever we need to, so that I could accommodate all the scenes and type the dialogues and all of that. For this specific project, we were told, take risks, just have fun. And obviously, as you can see, we clearly, took that in consideration and had fun with it. A lot of the judges absolutely loved the Sheets Creek characters because they knew them. It's also a show that comes from Canada, so it makes sense for the competition and the storytelling to be more like close to them. Next slide. And then after I built the whole scenes, I just recorded my screen going through the slides with my keyword using QuickTime, actually. I just recorded the screen by going through the slides and then put everything together on Premiere. I could have done this in a different way, just like building everything in Premiere, but this was easier for us. I just had 3 pieces, as you can see in the timeline, which is the blue rectangle you have underneath. That's just your video pieces in pink, and then my audio, which is that voice. It's just me with my phone, and then I just send the voice note to the computer and put it in the program. That's it. I didn't do anything fancy with it. The phone records voice pretty good. And then the third layer is just royalty-free audio that I found on YouTube. As long as it's your royalty-free, you're safe. And so this is how it became. Premiere allowed me to bake everything together without having to edit too much. And as you saw, I didn't have that many fancy transitions. It was a clean cut, but my dialogue helped me take the viewer through the whole story as we went through. Next slide. Again, just work smarter, not harder, whatever works for you. If Google Slides work for you, that should be the right decision. I also don't mind sharing my contact on the chat if you guys want to bounce any ideas, or if I could maybe give you guys some suggestions on what programs to use, because it will be easier than Rush or than Windows Movie. I'll be happy to help you guys out.
All right, that was awesome. What a great video. And everyone looking at that, that is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. It has characters, there's a clear business idea, there's really great setting, and of course, really, humor, which I think is something that you can't take for granted sometimes. So really great, really creative, really interesting. So students, I know we gave you a lot of information today. So do you have questions for any of us?
Looks like Chloe has a question. You have your hands up?
Yeah, I was wondering if like, I know there's a lot of talk about like product and like other things, but do you have to go in specific about like a business or something like that? Or can it just be like you defining like different aspects that you want to work on, I guess.
The project does specify that it should be a hospitality and tourism business, but just remember that I think we would all see that as wide. I mean, this could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit, it could be something that relates to tourists. I think last week we heard one about infrastructure, which is still related to tourism. It could be a, theme park, any of those kinds of commercial attractions. I mean, it should be a business, it should be innovative, it should look at sustainability and equity, but it, be creative about it, but it should be a business.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Danielle, I see that you're asking a question. So will our business have one sole concept, or should it have multiple green, affordable, sustainable, etc. Concepts? So what do you mean by having one concept or multiple? I don't know if Danielle, if you're willing to elaborate. So no, I don't know if we still have Danielle, but I think, one business that caters to multiple elements would probably be okay, if that's what you're saying. And in terms of Dr. Farrell, who would be the best contact for this project? I am seeing that question as well.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for the presentation. Excellent as ever. No, you can email me direct, or you can go to Gisele or Margaret, okay? But you can certainly come to me direct, no problem at all. And I'll put my email in the chat, okay? The key thing, the answer to all the questions will normally be in one of the 4 workshops, okay? So please go back to the workshops, rewatch them, and you're like, got it. Okay, and that's particularly true the video production that Gisele and Margaret have just discussed. So, but no, there's no problem coming to me at all.
Great. So everyone start writing him emails every 5 minutes. No, just kidding. Okay. So I am now seeing Danielle, one main idea like enhancing use of solar, or multiple like solar, water, etc. I would say, as long as it's coherent and connected, you could have multiple functions as a business. I just wouldn't go overboard just because you only have 3 minutes to explain this entire concept. So you wouldn't want something like a business that does 15 different sustainability pillars and we're going to tell you about all of them. It's only 3 minutes, so just keep in mind that limitation, but great question. And make sure you guys are looking in the chat. Lots of really good links here to different apps. And
Carissa, can I just add, what we will probably do, not next week, but the week after, we will just do an open Zoom where I'll just be there to face questions. So it won't be next week, it'll be the week after. So I would say next week you want to just dive into it, really throw yourself in, and then we can face questions the week after that. So that'd be the week commencing, I think it's March 8th is the Monday. So we'll do an open Zoom session, no presentation, just a Q&A in that week.
Excellent. So does anyone have any last questions? Oh, minimum time limit. Yeah, 3-minute video. So the video should be 3 minutes. Absolutely.
Oh no, I know it's 3 minutes, but what I know, isn't 3 minutes like the maximum?
Yeah, 3 minutes is the maximum. I don't know if there's a minimum, but I would guess that you're probably going to need all 3 minutes. That's just a guess. In terms of everything we're kind of expecting you to explain in 3 minutes, you'll probably need all 3 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Have we inspired all of you to think about the future?
There's a question there. How many people can be in the group? Did we?
I think we said 4.
I think it was 4.
Yeah, let me check.
I believe.
At the end of the day, there's 5. We're not going to quibble, but certainly no more than 5. The idea is 4. Just because beyond that it gets difficult, and then you get, oh, but somebody didn't do any work. Yeah, keep it to 4. It's easier just to manage.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, if you are working in a group, this is a great time to think about ways that you can do teamwork. So what is each person going to do? And Margaret was talking about her project, and I'm sure her and her group members divided things in different ways. I don't know, Margaret, do you want to speak to that? What did you find was the best way to kind of divvy up the work?
Yeah, so well, first we made sure to like converse and see what were everyone's choices first. Since I have some like graphic design background, I feel more comfortable taking over that side of the project. So they, allow me to do that. And then again, like the Google Slides, it helped us because our team members were not in the same city. So that allowed us to just jump in and build ideas on one similar document. So if some of you are out of state and not going to school on campus, Google Drive is a great resource. And then, just be open. If you don't feel like comfortable doing something, I'm sure the other team members will be happy to jump in and assist you. Also, I gotta say, you probably are all actors and actresses because of TikToks and all these apps. So I'm here like explaining to you things that you probably already know. So I'm sure you're gonna do absolutely great.
All right, that is awesome. And seeing that video, I think, gives us all inspiration that, you can do that, especially since you shared that you weren't like a technical whiz by any means. So it certainly looked great. All right, any last questions?
Yeah, Margaret, where did you use Premiere? Did you come to Rosen or did you have it downloaded?
I had it on my computer already. And like I said, and like I show you guys in the timeline, only use three links, just the video with the slides, and then the voiceover, which was just me recording with my phone, and then just royalty-free music that I found on YouTube. If you can't do it remotely, if I were me competing, I would probably want to do that so that I had everything from my personal computer. Because let's say that you're trying to think of some ideas and you want to get to the file and edit some things that you just come up with. If you do it at school, I mean, that's obviously an option, but it may not be as reachable as if you downloaded it from your phone when you connect remotely. So I think that's a great resource that you can do with the UCF apps.
Thank you.
All right, superb. So thank you all for joining us. We're very excited to see your projects, and just make sure you use all the valuable resources here at Rosen College. We can't wait to see them. Have a great day, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for
Thank you.